Yeah, so welcome. Thanks for taking the time. You're all over the world, and you have your lives, and so I'm very grateful to you for taking a few moments to be here with us. We are gradually launching this new book into the world. It's probably the closest experience I'll have in this body to giving birth. It's had this quality of being extraordinarily potent and keeps having steps that I didn't anticipate, and we just keep sort of breathing with it and moving it through. So the book is finished. We have it in a galley format at this point. We discovered a couple of days ago a really stunning error in the printing on the cover, which was very surprising, and so we're having to do some adjusting sort of on the fly. But the book, the offset print run that we're doing, I think will be out in mid-January, it's looking like now, which is a pushback. I know some of you have been waiting a very long time, and I sincerely apologize for the delays. But we wanted to put out something that was reflective of the quality and quantity of work that we put into it. And I'll just show you the book is going to look like this. It's the hardcover version. This is the hardcover version. So it has a dust jacket on the outside. This is the front cover of the dust jacket. The dust jacket comes off and it turns into a poster. So it's designed to convert into a poster that you can hang. You clip off these flaps. And then it's a hardcover book underneath that. So this is the book. She weighs in at 552 pages. 2 pounds, 1 ounce. No, I'm joking. I don't actually know how heavy the book is. But yeah, so, this is the first galley in which we found numerous mistakes. And so this is then the second galley, which you'll notice has the cover torn off because there was glue leaking, and so the cover was not flat, which is part of the challenge we had with this printer. So I'm going to read to you from this, which is the most current version of it. But I want to do a little bit of context setting first, and so that we just sort of ease into this process, because I've not done a lot of readings. I've written a lot of stuff, but I've not done a lot of readings. Sometimes I find readings to be a little bit less interactive than I like, and so I want this to be a little bit more engaged and interactive for those of you who would like it to be that. If you want to have a more, sort of receiving experience, that's also fine. But I want to teach a little bit at the front end of this, because this book is I think it's the first time we've successfully translated the model that we've been working on for about 30 years into non-technical language, right? So for those of you who've been following our work, maybe for some time, you know that I'm a connection phenomenologist. I've spent the last 30 years working at the intersections of neurophysiology and mindful awareness and indigenous lifeways. I've been really focused on looking at connection as a phenomenon and the deviation from an ancestral baseline in connection. So this is a good part of the foundation formulation of our work, is to note that the sort of long arc of the human lineage history is one that originated in small band hunter-gatherer contexts. And, that really forms the neurological and cultural baseline of our species. Make sense to you what I'm saying? I'm referring pretty directly to the work of our mentor Darshan Narvaez, who's a professor emerita at the University of Notre Dame. She's, I believe, now retired. She developed a body of work called The Evolved Nest, and has been really instrumental to our contextualizing, I would say, of these explorations of neurophysiology. So we've been following at this intersection for many, many years, and I have been trained as, I would say at this point, an interoceptive tracker. So I've been trained in hard ground tracking for a long time, but a lot of my focus has been on tracking the nervous system in vivo, right, as it's expressed and experienced in our lives. And so there's a set of methodologies of inquiry, that we've been elaborating for some time that are, I am not an indigenous person, so I cannot say that they're indigenous ways of knowing, but I can say that they resemble epistemologically a lot of the ways of knowing that are more ancestral. Does that make sense to you? And so, we've been working with a group of about 150 mentors around the world for about a decade. I mean, that group has grown in the last decade, but at this point it's about 150 mentors and advisors in about 25 disciplines of well-being from 24 cultures. So there's a significant collective enterprise behind the work, and I'm often the face of it, but that's beginning to evolve as more of our faculty is becoming more public-facing. So the book, I feel like it's really been a collective enterprise. It's been 30 years in the making. And if you want, I think you could say that it originated with my own sort of dissatisfaction with neuroscience as I was studying it in university. I studied at Yale. And the degree to which that whole study was vacant of aspects of interiority, and the degree to which the whole enterprise has become very, very brain-centric. And I don't think I could have languaged it like that at the time, but I think 30 years in, that's sort of what I would say. And so a lot of what we've been doing is looking really, really deeply at the autonomic nervous system, because the autonomic nervous system, you could say it's the neural architecture of the mind-body connection, right? It's the place where the body translates from a fundamental distinguishing between safety and danger and life threat. And from that sort of foundation assessment, it creates the energy processing templates through which we experience. And sometimes when I'm teaching this, I just teach it through the language of water, because it becomes very easy for people to understand that, right? If you come to Earth and you had encountered water for the first time and you were presented with the three faces that she wears, I would propose to you that you wouldn't believe it was one substance, right? You wouldn't believe it was the same element. You meet liquid water, you meet steam, you meet ice, and you're like, those are three different things entirely. Yes? Their physical and chemical properties are different, the way they behave is different, right? And I love this analogy because the autonomic nervous system is essentially identical to this. And so we can notice that the liquid water version of a person is very different than that person in steam, and almost entirely different from that person in ice. Make sense to you, what I'm saying? Yeah. And unfortunately, or fortunately, or I don't know what the right word is, but we live in a moment, in a time, in a civilization, I'll put that in quotes, that is really good at surfacing the steam and ice version of us. There's a lot of momentum in the civilization because people in steam and ice, for one thing, they're easier to extract from, right? People who feel safe and are able to access the liquid water version of themselves, it's harder to sell them trinkets. Capitalism doesn't work in the same way if people are in that state. And, a lot of what we've been trying to do at, I think, a cultural level is really change the discourse and focus it on this sort of push in the direction of health creation and salutogenesis through an autonomic lens. How do we turn on, how do we reclaim this access to the liquid water version of ourselves with the awareness that being able to kind of draw on those states is partly a function of feeling safe enough, right? And here's sort of where the rubber meets the road, because, I wrote this book, I literally finished it on November 5th in the United States. And I literally finished it that day with the kind of felt intuition that I had to finish it that day. I had to finalize the manuscript because the energetic was going to change. Intuition turned out to be accurate. I think if I had not had the book finished at that moment, I would have had to start rewriting it. But I added a section. This is something that, we do our own books, which has been somewhat accidental and somewhat on purpose. And it's a lucky thing that we do, because if I had turned this into a publisher and then said, oh, by the way, I'm adding another 70 pages to the first section, they would have looked at me like I had two heads. But I had to do that because I had to recontextualize the body of the work. And so the book is fractal. It's in 3 movements. And the first movement is an image. And the image on the cover is an interpretation of the autonomic nervous system. I'm going to just hold it up here. This is the least elegant way to do this probably, but I'm on a computer that doesn't have the image on it. That's not bad. Can you see that? Okay, so that's an autonomic mandala, if you will. That's the motif of the book. And let me try to translate that for you for just a moment. So at the center of that, there's an inverted triangle. And that triangle has 3 colors in it: blue, yellow, red. Okay? Makes sense? Tracking? If you pin Gabriel, you'll see. Yeah, thanks, Sigurd. I'm a bit of a technical disaster here, so thank you, Sigurd, for helping everybody out. So there's an inverted triangle. It has 3 segments, sections. One of them's blue, one of them's yellow, one of them's red. Okay? And then it is circled by 12 colors that represent autonomic states, which are various combinations of neuroception, so our neurological detection of safety, danger, and life threat, our neurology, the autonomic neurology that's active, and our neurochemistry, and we're looking at 3 primary neurochemistries. And when you combine those in a color theoretical fashion, you get this sort of circle or spiral of states that are related. And what it helps us do is sort of create a compass, a cartography, an autonomic cartography, the usefulness of which in part is to allow people to sort of more deeply navigate their moment-to-moment lived experience through an autonomic lens. Does it make sense to you? So in the upper right-hand corner, upper left, I guess, for you, 10 o'clock, 10 p.m., you have these sort of pure blue states, which are the kind of connection states that the book is pointing at and describing, where there's adequate safety online for us to engage in, health creation processes at an autonomic level. And then as you move in this direction, into this kind of zone of yellow, you start looking at, neuroceptions of danger, where people are responding to a threat. And then you move down here at the bottom, you're looking at sort of life threat responses. Yeah? But you'll notice that there are pathways out of life threat responses that are kind of in both directions. And part of the point that we're making with this work is to say that we can traverse this map in any number of ways. And that if we really understand the ways that our felt sense of safety, danger, and life threat, and our neurology and our chemistry work, we can really become agentic. We can become the agent of helping the system to shift when it gets stuck. And I want to just sort of normalize, and sort of reclaim this notion that there are no autonomic states that are bad states. They're all contextually adaptive. We need that full range of them in order to survive. It becomes problematic for us when we get stuck in a state that's not on the health creation side. Make sense to you? Yeah. So I think with that as a little bit of preamble, I'll do a little bit of reading from the text, and we can kind of do it in call and response. And I'll read a little bit. And then pause and kind of check in with the group. And if you have questions or comments, happy to field those and be in kind of dialogue with you all about it. But the first part of the book is this mapping of this cartography, and then there's a section that really looks at the whole body of work that we're calling autonomics, which is this sort of re-examination of in vivo autonomic physiology. Sort of provides that whole map. And then the third part of it is what we think of as a health creation manual, which is the original book, which is the Neurobiology of Connection, which is really focused on how do you elicit those health creating states. And I'll tell you one other sort of funny story, which is that the book was commissioned actually by a publisher in California. So we have a colleague in Boulder who, started raving about one of her publishers who she loves, and then I said, would you make an introduction? And she said, I'd be happy to, and she introduced me to the acquisitions editor of this publisher. And I pitched him on 2 projects that we were working on at the time, and he listened very politely, and then he said, I don't want either one of those. But I'm interested in having somebody write a book on the neurobiology of connection. And I was like, I got you, you know? Okay, like I'd love to do that. That's totally my wheelhouse. And he got really excited, and we went in this process, and he said, okay, I need you to provide me, you know, the outline and chapters and all this stuff that they sort of standardly ask for. And I was like, look, I don't know how to do that. It's not how I work. I said, I have to get inside the book. I have to feel it. I have to find it. It has to start to organize. And when that happens, it's probably gonna take me several months. I'll get back to you with those materials, because then I'll be able to feel the book from inside. And he said, okay. And so I did this, and I get back to them in like 2 months. And then he says to me, my editors don't like it. And I said, what do you mean? I said, you commissioned the book. What do you mean they don't like it? And he said, well, you know, you're writing a book that's about health creation. And I was like, yeah, that's called the Neurobiology of Connection. What did you want me to do? He said, I want you to write a book about illness and then how to fix it. I want you to write a book about, you know, just pick like depression and then how do you fix it? Or, you know, pick, and I go, but wait a minute, but the illness isn't the important part. Like, because it's a way of approaching wellness. He's like, but we don't know how to sell that book. And I'm like, but that doesn't seem like my problem. Like, I want to write a book about how do you create wellness. Anyway, so long story short, they were like, well, we respectfully don't want to publish that book. And I was like, I respectfully want to take the title you provided and write my own book. And so that's what happened. Neurobiology of Connection. Chapter 1, how we got here. In May of 2023, Vivek Murthy, hold on a second, I gotta change chairs here. I'm not in a reading chair now. All right, start it again. In May of 2023, Vivek Murthy, the acting U.S. Surgeon General, issued a Surgeon General's advisory about the loneliness epidemic in the United States of America. Before the pandemic, the Cigna Loneliness Index, which is the largest recurring study of loneliness in the United States, suggested that 49% of American adults felt lonely some or most of the time. During the pandemic in 2020, this number had risen to 61%. That is to say that 3 out of 5 people experience enduring states of loneliness as a part of their everyday lives. The report went on to say that loneliness, isolation, and disconnection was one of the underlying root drivers of mental distress, contributory to mental illness, and had an effect on people's longevity equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. 15 cigarettes per day. That's a lot of cigarettes. There are 20 of those little death sticks in a pack. That means disconnection in your life is like torching a pack and a half of smokes every 2 days. It incinerates your well-being at such a pace. The Surgeon General's report starkly points out a feature of contemporary American life that has been noted by sociologists for decades. In 2000, Harvard professor of public policy Robert Putnam, in Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Communities, published about the steady decline of bowling leagues in the United States as a key indicator of a broad drop in social capital in modern American adults. The book was based on interviews with 500,000 people, an extremely large data set. It noted that participation in these kinds of collective social activities was dropping precipitously, with disastrous effects for people's well-being. This phenomenon, in fact, is not all that new. This is a problem for humans because we're social animals, and our well-being is social in nature. Lonely, isolated, and disconnected humans are sick humans. While it's fairly easy to identify a number of proximate causes for this epidemic of loneliness, including the obvious recent fact that social distancing during the pandemic made it very difficult for people to gather together, as well as the rise of social media over the past decade, with more and more people spending time online in connection simulations, there is something much deeper at play here. Let us combine the awareness of this loneliness epidemic with the parallel observation that the data suggests that prior to the pandemic, 60 to 80% of visits to primary care had a stress-related component. Parenthetically, I'm not reading. Like, take a minute and just take that one in for a second. 60 to 80% of visits to primary care, not mental health, primary care, physical health, physicians, 60 to 80% of visits to primary care, stress-related. That's to say that 3 to 4 out of every 5 visits to your doctor are either directly because of a stress-induced condition, anxiety, gastrointestinal distress, sleep disorders, etc., or made worse by stress. How are these two broad phenomena related? Loneliness, isolation, and disconnection are a cause and a result of the autonomic nervous system responding to threat. Stress-related disorders are a result of the autonomic nervous system responding to threat. The common cause underneath both of these epidemics, one of loneliness, one of stress, is that modern people do not feel safe in our bodies. Modern people do not feel safe in our bodies. If we do not feel safe, we do not activate the biology of connection. If we do not activate the biology of connection, the biology of defense does not turn off. When the biology of defense becomes our normal state, when it becomes chronic and non-resolving, when it endures, we become ill. Sometimes it happens quickly and sometimes it happens slowly, but you know what? It happens every single damn time. My name is Gabriel, and I'm a connection phenomenologist. For the past 30 years, my research and clinical work has been focused at the intersection of autonomic physiology and awareness practice. One of the questions I've been studying deeply and consistently now for 3 decades is the deviation in modern culture from an ancestral baseline in safety and connection, and what we can do to change that. The question I am most keenly focused on in our work is how to help people turn on and keep on the neurological drivers of connection. This is of great importance because the drivers of connection are in fact the root drivers of well-being. I started out interested in the healing of stress-related disorders initially because I needed to heal them in myself. I continued because what we discovered was extraordinarily effective with everyone. The enterprise I direct has made profound breakthroughs in the diagnosis and treatment of a number of them. But what is slightly ironic, or slightly revelatory, depending on how you look at it, is that the key to many of our breakthroughs in treatment came not through learning to heal stress, but rather learning to create the conditions in which wellness could fully arise. As our transdisciplinary study of the nervous system progressed, and I received mentorship in fields ranging from autonomic physiology to neurocardiology to psychoneuroimmunology to cellular metabolic healing, what became increasingly apparent was that our modern healing modalities are focused on pathogenesis. They're focused on the remediation of disease states. This means that their entire framework is conceptualized in terms of returning to a pre-illness baseline. Yet the problem with this is twofold. First of all, the absence of ill-being is not the same as well-being. A pre-illness threshold does not mean that you're well. Just as the absence of hate is not love, and the absence of danger is not safety, the absence of illness is not the same as wellness. Wellness is vibrant. Wellness is shimmering vitality. How many people do you know that you would describe as shimmeringly vital? Secondly, in our clinical research, it turned out there were 2 routes to treating disease. You can either treat the disease itself, or you can activate the root drivers of well-being and allow them to change the internal context in which the disease process unfolds. The clinical reality is typically a mix of the two, but what we discovered is that a salutogenic, this is health-creating, model of well-being is as powerful or more powerful than addressing the specific symptoms. Allow me to say this in a slightly different way. What we discovered with stress-related disorders, anxiety, depression, gastrointestinal disease, complex chronic illness, post-traumatic stress injury, many autoimmune illnesses, is that if we could create a pathway to shift the autonomic nervous system from a baseline in threat response to one of safety and connection, that shift in and of itself, which changed the global internal context of the client's inward landscape, transformed the inner climate in such a way that symptoms were either reversed, resolved, or dissolved. if we could get the client's nervous system to feel and register a felt sense of safety 51% of the time, the disease state would often dissolve without us putting any further focus on the disease. In many of the cases where we achieved breakthrough outcomes that allopathic medicine declared simply impossible, and where we definitively shifted people from disease to well-being, we never treated the disease directly. We helped the person shift the baseline in their nervous systems from being centered in threat to safety, and when we did this, the interior energy processing templates and metabolic climate of the body changed so drastically that the body healed itself. With respect to stress-related disorders, you can either focus on removing the disease or activating the person's intrinsic root drivers of well-being. Sometimes in acute conditions, you have to focus on the disease. Yet often, even if symptoms are severe, activating the intrinsic drivers of well-being does more to change the outcome. This represents a radical reconceptualization of what we're doing in healing and how we're doing it. It suggests the notion that the medicine of the future, which is in fact an ancestral future, may be better served by focusing on the creation of well-being than the remediation of disease. It suggests that we may have brought the wrong things into focus if our aim is well-being. As Vincent Folletti, MD, the co-principal investigator of the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, noted so succinctly, what we are treating in medicine as the problem is often the patient's solution to a much deeper problem that we cannot see. I would offer a disturbing corollary to this by saying that often the patient's solution to that deeper problem, offered up endogenously by their own innate bodily knowing, allopathic medicine treats as symptoms and tries to suppress. Allopathic medicine's approach to stress-related disorders, which comprise most of what ails modern people, is not only upside down, it's also backwards.